Tonight, we descend into the oldest mystery in Elder Scrolls lore. We walk the path from the beginning place, where light and chaos first collided, to the throne rooms of the Third Empire, where the worship of these gods became law. We will explore their creation, their sacrifice, their influence across every game, and the controversies that still rage about them in the Fourth Era. But before we can understand the gods, we must understand what came before them. We must peer into the void before time began, where twin forces danced in eternal opposition, and from their struggle, all things were born. Chapter 1. The Beginning Place. Anu, Padme, and the Aedra. Before there was Nirn, before there were mortals, before there was even the concept of time itself, there was the beginning place. Some call it Orbis, others call it the Grey Maybe. It is the imperceptible realm, the space between existence and non-existence, between is and is not. And in this formless void, two primordial forces existed in eternal opposition: Anu and Padme. Think of them not as gods in a conventional sense, but as primordial forces, fundamental principles made manifest. Different creation myths describe them in different ways. Some traditions tell of Anu and Padme as brothers who came into the void, whose conflict over a third, being named Nir, led to violence and creation. Other accounts present them more abstractly. Anu as the principle of stasis, of light, of order, the everlasting, ineffable light, the force that says things should remain as they are. Padme as his opposite in every way: chaos, darkness, change, the corrupting, inexpressible action, the force that says nothing can stay the same. These twin forces existed in eternal opposition, not necessarily as a war of hatred, but as something more fundamental. They existed to define each other. Without light, there can be no concept of darkness. Without order, chaos has no meaning. They were the original duality, and from their interplay, reality itself began to take shape. The ancient myths tell us that when these forces clashed and mingled, when their essences mixed in the space where they touched, something extraordinary happened. Their conflict was so powerful, so fundamental, that it created echoes, fragments, beings born from the very essence of creation and destruction. These were the Aedra, the original spirits. The Aedra were neither fully of Anu nor fully of Padme. They existed as combinations, as reflections, as possibilities. Some leaned more toward order, others toward chaos. But all of them possessed a spark of both primal forces. They were the first true beings, the first entities that could be called gods. Among these, Aedra emerged others, more refined, more focused. In one interpretation of the myths, Anu, seeking to know himself, birthed his own soul. This soul was called Anuiel, the soul of everything, the refined essence of stasis and permanence. Not to be outdone, Padme did the same, creating Sithis from himself. Sithis was not merely chaos, but the void incarnate, the embodiment of limitless possibility and change, the force that would one day whisper to assassins in the dark and demand the ending of all things. Following this pattern, Anuel, contemplating itself, gave birth to another, Auriel. The elves would come to know this being as their greatest ancestor, the king of the Oldma. Humans would eventually call him Akatosh. He was the first to truly crystallize, the first to achieve form and identity. With his emergence, something revolutionary happened. Time began. Before Auriel, there was only the timeless chaos of the dawn. With his formation, suddenly there was a past and a future. There was a beginning and an end. The other Aedra, seeing this, found it easier to define themselves. They began to take shape, to develop personalities, to become discrete beings rather than formless concepts drifting in the void. But Sithis, embodying change and limitation, responded. From this primordial force emerged Lorcan. He was called the Doom Drum, the space god, the creator, trickster, tester. Unlike the other Aedra, Lorcan was defined by a singular, consuming vision. He looked at the chaos of the beginning place, at the endless forms swirling in the grey maybe, and he saw something that didn't exist yet. He saw potential. The Aedra continued to multiply and diversify. Magnus, the architect and god of magic, emerged with plans and designs that would shape reality itself. Trinimac, the champion and warrior, stood as the greatest hero among the spirits. Yufra, who would one day become the first Earthbone, began to contemplate the relationship between spirit and substance. Kinnereth, Mara, Stendar, all of the beings who would eventually be called the Aedra, took their first forms in this primordial time. But the Dawn Era, as it would later be called, was not a stable time. It was not truly an era at all, because time as mortals understand it did not fully exist yet. Events happened without sequence. Cause and effect were fluid concepts, and the same moment could be experienced in infinite different ways. The Aedra existed in this state of constant flux, powerful beyond mortal comprehension, but lacking direction, lacking purpose. They were immortal, infinite, and perfect in their own way. They had everything and needed nothing. They could create anything they imagined simply by willing it into existence. They were gods in the truest sense. And that is precisely what Lorcan sought to change. Different cultures interpret what happened next in vastly different ways. To the elves, particularly the Altmer, Lorcan was a trickster, a deceiver who robbed them of their divinity. To humans, he was the greatest champion of mortality, the god who loved them enough to die for them. To the Khajiit, he was a demon, the moon beast who brought corruption. To the Nords, he was Shor, the warrior king who died, fighting for his people. But all the myths agree on one thing. Lorcan had a vision, and he convinced the Aedra to make it real. He spoke of creating something new, something that had never existed before. A world, a mortal plane, a place of limitation, of challenge, of growth and change and death. He called it Mundus. Chapter 2, The Creation of Mundus, Lorcan's Vision. Lorcan's proposition to the Aedra was both simple and revolutionary. Create a world, not a realm like the plains of oblivion that the Daedric princes would later craft from their own essence, not a reflection of Aetherius, the realm of pure magic and light, but a mortal world, a place where the rules of reality would be fixed, where time would flow in one direction, where beings would be born and die, and struggle and triumph. The question that has echoed through the ages is this: was Lorcan a visionary or a deceiver? Did he genuinely believe in the beauty of mortality? Or did he knowingly trick the gods into sacrificing their power? The answer depends on who you ask. According to Cyrodiilic tradition, preserved in texts like Shizar's Song, Lorcan spoke beautifully to the gods. He described the concept of becoming mothers and fathers, of taking responsibility, of making great sacrifices with no guarantee of success. He painted a picture of creation that moved them beyond mystery and tears, showing them the potential for something greater than their eternal, unchanging existence. The idea was strange and new. It meant cutting off parts of themselves to create this world. It meant sacrificing power and control. It meant becoming vulnerable. But Lorcan's words were persuasive, and one by one, the Aedra began to agree. Auriel was among the first. Some myths suggest Lorcan promised him kingship of this new world, a realm where he could rule as the greatest of all gods. Whether this was true or merely manipulation, Auriel lent his power to the project. Kinnereth was next. She provided the space itself, the void in which this new world would exist. Without her contribution, there would be nowhere for Mundus to form. She created the heavens, the expanse between realms where the mortal plane could take shape. Magnus, the architect, took Lorcan's vision and began to design it. He created the blueprint for reality, the fundamental rules that would govern this new world. Magic, physics, the laws of nature, all of these came from Magnus's brilliant, meticulous plans. Mara, Stendar, Dibella, Julianos, Zenithar, and countless other Aedra added their essence to the growing creation. Each contributed something vital: compassion, justice, beauty, knowledge, labor. The mortal world would need all of these things to function. And then the work began. The Aedra poured their divine essence into Mundus. They gave of themselves in ways they had never done before, shaping the raw material of creation into something solid, something real. Mountains rose from nothing. Oceans filled the vast emptiness. The sky took form, and beneath it, the sphere of Nirn began to coalesce. But as the work progressed, something became clear. Something that perhaps only Lorcan had known from the beginning. Creation was consuming them. With every piece of themselves they poured into Mundus, the Aedra grew weaker. Their infinite power began to diminish. Their immortal essence started to fade. The price of creating a mortal world was that the creators themselves would become less than they were. They were dying in a way that gods had never died before. Magnus was the first to realize the full extent of what was happening. The great architect, seeing his own power draining away, understanding that continuing would mean the loss of everything he was, made a choice. He fled. He tore a hole in the very fabric of reality and escaped back to Aetherius, abandoning the project entirely. His departure left a wound in the world. The massive tear he created became the sun, and through it, raw magic pours into Mundus, even to this day. It is a permanent scar, a reminder of the architect's flight. Many other Aedra followed Magnus through his escape route, though the holes they left were smaller. These became the stars, and these fleeing spirits became known as the Magna Gay, the Star Orphans. They had participated in creation just enough to be marked by it, but they escaped before giving too much. Those who remained faced a terrible reality. The project had progressed too far to stop. If they abandoned it now, everything they had already sacrificed would be for nothing. Mundus would collapse into chaos, and their essence would be lost forever anyway. They had no choice but to continue. Some of the Aedra, seeing no other option, gave themselves completely to the world. They became the earthbones, the fundamental laws of nature. Jofre was the first to do this, transforming himself into the very rules that would govern natural law. Others followed, becoming the bones of the earth, the structure upon which all physical reality rests. Gravity, decay, the passage of time, the cycle of seasons, all of these would be maintained by these sacrificed spirits. Other Aedra tried to preserve themselves in different ways. They married and had children, hoping their lineage would carry on what they could no longer maintain. Each generation was weaker than the last, more diluted, more mortal. These descendants would eventually become the first elves, the Aldmer, and from them, all the races of Myr would descend. Still others simply faded. Their essence spread so thin across creation that they ceased to exist as discrete beings. They became part of the world itself, nameless and forgotten. But a few, the strongest of the Aedra, managed to maintain their identity. They were forever changed, forever weakened, but they endured. These would become the 8 divines that mortals would one day worship. They had given so much of themselves that they could no longer interact with the world directly, could no longer manifest their full power, but they remained as distant, watchful presences. And then there was Lorcan. The elves tell the story that when the Aedra realized what had happened, when they understood that they had been tricked into surrendering their divinity, they turned on Lorcan in fury. Led by Oriel and Trinimac, they hunted him down and demanded justice. They called a great gathering to determine his punishment. This gathering would take place at a tower that would become known as the Adamantine Tower, and the meeting itself would be called Convention. It would be the moment when the Dawn era ended and linear time truly began. Chapter 3: Convention, the Judgment and the Departure. At the apex of the Adamantine Tower, in a moment that exists outside normal time, the remaining Aedra gathered to pass judgment on Lorcan. Convention. The word itself carries weight in Elder Scrolls lore. It was not merely a meeting, but the meeting, the singular event that would define the rules of existence going forward. Everything that had come before was fluid, uncertain, subject to change. Everything that came after would be locked into causality, into the forward flow of time. The tower itself had been erected for this purpose. Some sources claim it was Akatosh's vessel, transformed into a structure at one of the joint points where the earth bones held reality together. Others say it was built by the Aedra as a place to convene. Regardless of its origin, the Adamantine Tower also known as Aedra or the Tower, became the first fixed point in reality, the anchor that would allow linear history to finally begin. The charges against Lorcan were clear. He had convinced the Aedra to create Mundus, either through lies, omissions, or carefully crafted truths. In doing so, he had caused the loss of their divinity. Many spirits had been destroyed entirely. Others were reduced to shadows of their former selves. The infinite, perfect existence they had known in the dawn was gone forever, replaced by limitation, weakness, and the threat of true death. Different accounts of convention describe different aspects of what transpired. The Altmeri version emphasizes Lorcan's treachery. They paint him as a demon who deliberately deceived the gods, who wanted to trap them in mortality out of jealousy or malice. In their telling, Auriel stood as the champion of the betrayed gods, demanding that Lorcan be punished in the harshest way possible. Human traditions, particularly those of the Nords and Imperials, tell a different story. In their myths, Lorcan did not deceive. He enlightened. He showed the gods a path to something greater than static immortality. Yes, they lost power, but they gained purpose. Yes, they became limited, but those limitations gave meaning to existence. In this interpretation, convention was not a trial of a criminal, but a tragic misunderstanding between gods who held different visions of what creation should be. But whatever the moral interpretation, the facts of what happened are largely agreed upon across cultures. Lorcan was judged guilty. The punishment decreed was the separation of the god from his divine center, his heart. Trinimac, the greatest warrior among the Aedra, was chosen to carry out the sentence. In some tellings, he tore Lorcan's heart from his chest with his bare hands. In others, Lorcan himself, acknowledging his fate, opened his chest and allowed the heart to be taken. The heart could not be destroyed. It was too bound to the world itself. Lorcan's essence had been so thoroughly woven into Mundus that attempting to destroy his heart would have destroyed all of creation. So instead, Auriel, now also called Akatosh, took the heart and fastened it to an arrow. He drew his great bow and fired it as far as he possibly could, hurling the heart away to a place where, hopefully, it could never be found. The heart sailed across Tamriel like a meteorite of divine essence. When it struck the earth, the impact was cataclysmic. The ground erupted upward, forming a massive volcano. An entire island rose from the sea around the impact site. This would become Red Mountain in Vardenfell, and the heart would remain there, buried deep within the volcanic fires for thousands of years. The fall of the heart created the second tower, Red Mountain itself. With this, Mundus gained a special kind of divinity, a strange stability born from the death of a god. Reality could now exist without the full presence of the divine. As for Lorcan himself, his fate varied by telling. Some say he was killed outright, his spirit banished to whatever afterlife awaits slain gods. Others say his body was flung into the sky, where it split in two and became the moons Massa and Secunda. Still others claim he endured in a diminished form, doomed to wander Nirn in secret. appearing occasionally as champions of humanity throughout the ages. But convention was not only about Lorcan's punishment. The Aedra also had to decide what to do about themselves. The spirits who remained after Magnus's flight made a choice. Those who had already transformed into earthbones were locked into their roles, eternal and unchanging, maintaining the laws of nature from within. Those who had become El-Nofe would continue diminishing, eventually giving rise to mortals. But the strongest remaining Aedra, those who would become the 8 divines, made a different decision. They chose to leave the mortal world behind. Their continued presence was dangerous. They were too powerful, too reality warping. Their mere existence caused instability in the newly formed world. If they remained fully manifest, Mundus might tear itself apart. So they departed to Aetherius, the realm of pure magic, joining Magnus in his exile. But they did not fully abandon Mundus. They left behind anchors, connections. Each of them became associated with one of Tahor, the planets visible in Nirn's night sky. These planets are not merely celestial bodies, but the very planes of the gods themselves, seen from the mortal realm. Akatosh became the great sun-like body at the center. Arche, Dibella, Julianos, Kinnereth, Mara, Stendar, and Zenithar each claimed their own sphere, orbiting around each other in a cosmic dance. They could still influence the mortal world, could still answer prayers and grant blessings, but they could no longer walk among mortals as they once had. With this departure, convention ended. The Dawn era closed. The Merethic era began, and with it, linear time. History, as mortals understand it, could finally be recorded. The age of myths gave way to the age of heroes, and in the absence of the gods, the world they had created began to flourish. Chapter 4. Akatosh, the dragon god of time. Among all the divines, one stands first. One is called the King of the Gods, the champion of the empire, the force without which reality itself would collapse into temporal chaos. His name is Akatosh, and his story is perhaps the most complex of all the divines. Akatosh is known by many names across the cultures of Tamriel. To the Altmer and Bosmer, he is Auriel, the king of the Aldmer, the soul of Anuiel, and thus the soul of Anu itself. To the Khajiit, he is Alkosh, the dragon king of cats, the first cat who sits at once as the weaver and the incarnation of time's flow. To the Nords, his relationship is more complicated, as they struggle with the distinction between Akatosh and Alduin, the World Eater. But to the Imperials and the empire they built, he is Akatosh, the dragon god of time, the first among the divines, the patron and protector of the rightful rulers of Tamriel. The mythology of Akatosh positions him as the first spirit to take recognizable form in the beginning place. When he crystallized from the chaos of Anu and Padome's interaction, time itself began. Before Akatosh, there was only the endless now of the dawn. After him, there was past, present, and future. His very existence created the framework that allows for history, for cause and effect, for the linear progression that mortals take for granted. This makes Akatosh fundamentally different from the other divines. He is not merely a powerful god among gods. He is the principle that allows the other gods to exist as discrete entities at all. Without time, there can be no sequence of events. Without sequence, there can be no change. Without change, there can be no distinct beings. In a very real sense, all of the other Aedra owe their existence to Akatosh's emergence. His sphere of influence encompasses endurance, invincibility, and everlasting legitimacy. These are not arbitrary domains. They flow directly from his nature as the god of time. Time endures. It cannot be defeated or overcome. It will outlast everything, and thus any authority derived from time itself carries the same permanence. This is why Akatosh became so important to the empire. A ruler who claims divine mandate from the god of time is not just claiming temporary power. They are claiming legitimacy that is as eternal and inevitable as time itself. The empire is time made political. The empire is the march of history. The empire, in the eyes of its faithful, cannot fall because time itself cannot end. Akatosh's connection to dragons reinforces this symbolism. Dragons, in Elder Scrolls lore, are not merely powerful beasts. They are fragments of Akatosh himself, pieces of his divine essence given form and will. Each dragon is, in a sense, a child of time. They are immortal unless truly destroyed. They speak in the Thuum, the voice that can rewrite reality itself, and they are intrinsically tied to the flow of dominance and power. The greatest of the dragons, Alduin, was called the firstborn of Akatosh. He was meant to be the world eater, the force that would end each kalpa, each iteration of the world, so that a new one could begin. But Alduin grew proud. He proclaimed himself a god rather than a servant of the natural order. This betrayal of his duty is why Parthenax, another of Akatosh's children, eventually turned against him. The theological debate about whether Alduin and Akatosh are the same being has raged among scholars for centuries. The Akatosh Chantry, the primary religious order devoted to the dragon god, insists they are one and the same. Alduin, they argue, is simply the aspect of Akatosh that represents endings and renewal. The Nords violently disagree. To them, Akatosh is a good god, a force of order and protection, while Alduin is a tyrant, a false god who must be destroyed. This disagreement reflects a deeper truth about the nature of the Aedra. They are so vast, so fundamental to reality, that different cultures perceive them in radically different ways. The Akatosh worshipped in the imperial city might be functionally the same deity as the Ariel, venerated by the snow elves. But the relationship between the god and the worshipper creates a distinct experience. Akatosh's most famous intervention in mortal affairs came through his covenant with Saint Alessia. When the Nedic slaves rose up against their Aeolid oppressors in the First Era, Alessia prayed to the gods for aid. Akatosh answered. He made a pact. He would grant Alessia and her descendants dragon blood, the essence of his own power, and through this bloodline, he would protect Mundus from the forces of oblivion. This covenant was sealed in the Amulet of Kings, a divine artifact containing a gem made from Alessia's own soul, along with 8 other gems representing each of the 8 divines. As long as a descendant of the dragon blood sat on the throne and the dragon fires in the Temple of the One remained lit, the barriers between Mundus and Oblivion would hold strong. The Daedric princes would be unable to physically manifest on Nirn. This covenant endured for thousands of years. The Alessian dynasty fell, but the dragon blood continued through Riemann Cyrodiil and later through Tiber Septim. Each time a new emperor was crowned, they would light the dragon fires, renewing Akatosh's protection. But covenants can be broken. At the end of the Third Era, during the events known as the Oblivion Crisis, the last heir of the Septim line, Martin Septim, was forced to make the ultimate sacrifice. With the barriers failing and Mehrunes Dagon himself manifesting in the imperial city, Martin shattered the Amulet of Kings and invoked the power of Akatosh directly. The result was spectacular. Akatosh's avatar appeared, a massive dragon formed of divine fire and fury. In a battle that shook the foundations of reality, this avatar fought Mehrunes Dagon himself, driving the Daedric prince back into oblivion and resealing the barriers. Martin Septim was consumed in the transformation, his mortal form becoming one with Akatosh forever. The statue of this avatar still stands in the ruins of the Temple of the One, a permanent reminder of the day a god walked on Nirn to save the mortal world. The worship of Akatosh is structured and formal. His primary cathedral stands in Kvatch, or at least it did before the city's destruction during the Oblivion Crisis. The Akatosh Chantry, the organization devoted to his worship, maintains that he embodies 3 key qualities. Endurance. Akatosh endures because time endures. His faithful are taught to carry on despite fatigue, stress, or adverse conditions. To worship Akatosh is to persist. Invincibility. Akatosh cannot be conquered because time cannot be defeated. Those who stand with him inherit this quality. Everlasting legitimacy. What Akatosh sanctions cannot be considered false or unjustified. His approval grants permanent authority. The commandments given to his worshippers reflect these qualities. Serve and obey your emperor. Study the covenants. Worship the 8 divines, not just Akatosh alone. Do your duty without complaint. Heed the commands of the saints and priests. These are not suggestions. They are the foundational rules of a faith built on order and hierarchy. The Chantry's militant arm, the Order of the Hour, enforces these principles through action. These knights are sworn to protect Akatosh's temples and to carry out his will as interpreted by the Church. Throughout history, they have defended the faithful, hunted heretics, and served as the strong arm of divine justice. Akatosh has left behind artifacts of immense power. The Amulet of Kings is lost forever, shattered to save the world. But other relics remain. The armor of Tiber Septim, stained with the blood of the god emperor, still carries Akatosh's blessing. During the Oblivion Crisis, this armor was used to satisfy the requirement for divine blood in a ritual to save the world. There is also the matter of the dragon fires themselves. Though the amulet is gone and the covenant severed, the Temple of the One remains a holy sight. Pilgrims still come to see the Avatar's statue, to remember the day when Akatosh proved beyond doubt that the divines still care about the fate of mortals. But perhaps Akatosh's greatest gift to mortals is not his protection, but his promise of stability. In a world where Daedric princes scheme and shift reality on a whim, where dragons once enslaved humanity, where every era seems on the brink of apocalypse, Akatosh represents continuity. He is the assurance that time will keep flowing, that the sun will rise tomorrow, that the world will endure. As the primate of Kvatch once said, Akatosh sees beyond the concerns of the day and contemplates the entire expanse of time. The current crisis, whatever it may be, is merely a ripple in the eternal flow. Akatosh has everything well in hand. That faith, that trust in the permanence of divine order, is what has made Akatosh the central figure in the imperial religion for thousands of years. He is not merely worshipped, he is the foundation upon which the entire structure of faith rests. Chapter 5. The Goddesses, Kinnereth, Mara, and Dibella. If Akatosh represents the order and structure of the divine, the three goddesses of the pantheon represent the living, nurturing aspects of creation. They are the forces that transform cold structure into warm reality, that take the framework of existence and fill it with meaning, beauty, and compassion. Let us begin with Kinnereth, the goddess of the heavens. Kinnereth, known to the Nords as Kine, to the Khajiit as Kenathi, and to the Redguards as Tava, is the goddess of the sky, wind, and all the elements of air. Her sphere encompasses nature itself, the wild places where civilization has not yet tamed the land, and the unseen spirits that move through the world. According to legend, Kinnereth was the first of the Aedra to agree to Lorcan's plan. Where others hesitated, uncertain about this strange proposal to create a limited world, Kinnereth immediately understood the potential. She provided the space itself, the void in which Mundus could form. Without her contribution, there would have been nowhere for the world to exist. The heavens, the sky, the very expanse between realms, all of this came from Kinnereth. Her connection to nature is fundamental to understanding her role in the pantheon. While Akatosh provides the temporal structure and the other gods contribute various aspects of civilization, Kinnereth represents the raw world itself. She is the goddess of forests and rivers, of mountains and storms, of the untamed wilderness that existed before mortals and will endure after them. This makes her particularly important to the common people. Sailors pray to her for favorable winds. Travelers seek her blessing for safe journeys. Farmers look to her for rain to water their crops. She is the goddess of practical, daily interaction with the natural world, not distant and formal like Akatosh, but immediate and accessible. The Nords have a special relationship with Kine. In their mythology, she is the wife of Shor, Lorcan's Nordic aspect, and she stands as one of the most powerful forces in their pantheon. The throat of the world, the highest mountain in all of Tamriel, is sacred to her. It was on this mountain that she sent Parthenax to teach the first Nords the Thu'um, the voice. This gift of the voice is central to Nordic culture. the ability to shout, to speak words of power that can reshape reality, comes directly from Kine. The Greybeards, the monastic order that lives atop the throat of the world, worship her as their patron. Their entire practice is built on the idea that the voice is a gift from the divine that must be used with wisdom and restraint. Kinnereth is also said to have heralded the coming of Pelinal Whitestrake, the legendary champion who fought alongside Saint Alessia during the Slave Rebellion. She recognized him as a force necessary for the liberation of humanity, and her blessing allowed him to wage his brutal campaign against the Aelids. Interestingly, despite her importance, Kinnereth is the only one of the 9 divines who does not have a dedicated chapel in Cyrodiil during the Third Era. Scholars have debated why this might be. Some suggest it is because her worship is meant to take place in nature itself, not in enclosed buildings. Others think it was simply an oversight or political decision. Regardless, there are way shrines to her scattered throughout the wilderness, places where travelers can receive her blessing in the open air. In Skyrim, she has a proper temple in Whiterun, where priestesses tend to wounded soldiers and sick citizens. The Gildergreen, a sacred tree that grows in front of the temple, is said to be a child of the great tree at the center of Kinnereth's realm. When the tree was damaged, restoring it required a pilgrimage to gather sap from its parent, emphasizing the connection between the goddess and the natural world. Kinnereth teaches her followers to use nature's gifts wisely, to respect the balance between civilization and wilderness, and to protect the spirits of the earth. Her followers oppose those who would corrupt or destroy nature, making them natural enemies of necromancers and others who pervert the natural order. If Kinnereth is the world made manifest, then Mara is the love that binds it together. Mara, the mother goddess, the divine mother, is the goddess of love, fertility, compassion, and agriculture. She appears in nearly every cultural pantheon across Tamriel, with the notable exceptions of the Dunmer and Argonians, who follow their own unique paths. This near-universal worship speaks to her fundamental importance in mortal life. In the Merethic era, Mara was originally worshipped simply as a fertility goddess. But as civilizations grew more complex, her sphere expanded to encompass agriculture, the cultivation of the land that feeds civilization, and eventually love itself in all its forms, romantic, familial, and compassionate. There is a beautiful symmetry to this evolution. Fertility becomes agriculture, becomes love. The force that creates new life becomes the force that sustains it, becomes the force that gives it meaning. Mara's journey from simple fertility goddess to the Divine Mother mirrors the journey of civilization itself, from hunter-gatherers to complex societies built on family, community, and mutual care. Some traditions associate Mara with Nirn, the female principle of the cosmos who gave birth to creation itself. This makes Mara not just a goddess of love, but the very embodiment of the creative force that brought the world into being. Her priests teach that it was Mara who first gave birth to creation, positioning her as a counterpart to Lorcan, the creative impulse made divine. Mara's relationship to the other divines varies by culture. In some traditions, she is the wife or concubine of Akatosh, the dragon god of time. In others, she is associated with Lorcan himself. The Bosmer claim she is the wife of Auriel. These varying relationships reflect different cultural understandings of how love and time, or love and creation, interact. The worship of Mara is deeply tied to the institution of marriage. In Cyrodiil and Skyrim, weddings are performed in Mara's temples by her priests. The Amulet of Mara, a simple necklace bearing her symbol, is worn by those seeking marriage. In Nordic tradition, proposing marriage involves presenting your beloved with such an amulet. This makes Mara's temples gathering places for communities. Unlike the formal, hierarchical worship of Akatosh or the wilderness shrines of Kinnereth, Mara's temples are warm, welcoming spaces where people come to celebrate life's milestones. Marriages, births, and the simple need for compassion all draw people to her doors. The benevolence of Mara is one of the largest charitable organizations in Tamriel. Led by a patriarch and allied with the Temple of Stendar, the benevolence operates temples across the continent, providing aid to the poor, healing to the sick, and comfort to the grieving. They embody Mara's commandment to her followers: live soberly and peacefully, honor your parents, and preserve the peace and security of home and family. Among the Red Guards, Mara is known as Morwa, the fertility goddess. She is always depicted with 4 arms, so that she can grab more husbands, a representation that reflects the more polygamous traditions of Yokudan culture. This version of Mara is considered the favorite wife of Ruptga, their version of Akatosh, and her worship remains strong throughout Hammerfell. The Kothringi, the now extinct indigenous humans of Black Marsh, worshipped a trinity they called Dibe Mara Kin, combining Dibella, Mara, and Kinnereth as the mothers in the Aroundus. This unified worship of the 3 goddesses suggests a deep understanding of how beauty, love, and nature work together to sustain life. Mara's influence extends beyond mortal relationships. She represents compassion in its broadest sense, the quality of looking at another being and seeing their suffering as worthy of attention and aid. In a world as brutal as Tamriel, where war is constant and life is often cheap, Mara stands as a reminder that mercy and kindness are not weaknesses but strengths. Her blessings focus on restoration and healing, both physical and spiritual. Priests of Mara are among the most skilled healers in Tamriel, and her temples serve as hospitals and sanctuaries for those who have nowhere else to turn. Where Mara represents love as compassion and nurturing, Dibella represents love as passion and beauty. She is the goddess who reminds mortals that life is not merely about survival, but about joy, art, and the celebration of beauty in all its forms. Dibella's sphere encompasses beauty, love, art, and music. She is the patroness of artists, musicians, and poets, but also of lovers who seek to express their passion. Her worship celebrates the physical and aesthetic pleasures of life, from the creation of a beautiful painting to the intimate connection between lovers. In Cyrodiil, Dibella has nearly a dozen different cults, each focusing on a different aspect of her worship. Some are devoted to women specifically, teaching them to recognize and celebrate their own beauty. Others focus on artists and aesthetics, gathering to create and appreciate art. Still others practice erotic instruction, teaching that physical intimacy, when approached with honesty and care, is a form of worship in itself. This last aspect makes Dibella perhaps the most controversial of the divines in some circles. Her teachings are explicitly sex-positive, viewing physical pleasure not as something shameful, but as a divine gift. She does not demand monogamy from her followers. Instead, she teaches that all forms of love should be honest, consensual, and caring. Deception and manipulation betray her principles, but genuine affection expressed physically is sacred. The Dibellan arts, as practiced by her most devoted followers, involve various rituals and practices related to physical pleasure. These are not mere hedonism, but attempts to achieve a spiritual connection through physical means. To Dibella's faithful, the body is not separate from the soul, and pleasure is not opposed to piety. But Dibella is far more than the goddess of physical love. She is the goddess of all beauty, and that includes the beauty of art and music. Her followers believe that beauty enriches life, that the creation and appreciation of art is as vital to human flourishing as food and shelter. A world without beauty would be a world barely worth living in. This makes Dibella's worship particularly important in cities and among the educated classes. While peasants might focus their worship on practical deities like Kinnereth or Zenithar, nobles and artists often favor Dibella. She represents the heights of civilization, the refinement that separates humans from beasts. The goddess teaches that mortals should open their hearts to the noble secrets of art and love, that they should treasure the gifts of friendship and seek joy and inspiration in the mysteries of love. These commandments are less about rules and more about aspirations, encouraging her followers to live fully and deeply. Houses of Dibella, as her temples are called, typically maintain 3 or 4 white cats, as these animals are sacred to the goddess. The temples themselves are often beautiful structures, showcasing the artistic traditions of their regions. Worship in a house of Dibella might involve music, dance, poetry readings, or simply the appreciation of art. The Order of the Lily, a knightly order dedicated to Dibella, served as protectors of her temples and champions of her ideals. Like other divine knightly orders, they were tasked with defending the faithful and hunting those who would corrupt or destroy beauty. Among the Red Guards, Dibella is particularly popular with women, and her worship is accepted mainly by the cosmopolitan forebears rather than the more traditional crowns. This reflects the ongoing cultural tensions in Hammerfell between those who embrace imperial culture and those who maintain Yokudan traditions. The brush of true paint, one of Dibella's legendary artifacts, is said to be able to create paintings that become real. This artifact embodies the goddess's belief that art and reality are not separate, that beauty created by mortals can achieve its own form of divinity. Together, these 3 goddesses represent the life-giving, nurturing, beautifying forces in the pantheon. Kinnereth provides the world itself, the stage on which life unfolds. Mara fills it with love and compassion, binding mortals together in communities and families. Dibella adorns it with beauty and passion, making that life worth living. They are the mothers, the nurturers, the forces that say existence should not merely be orderly and structured, but should also be beautiful, loving, and alive with possibility. Chapter 6. The gods of knowledge and order: Julianos, Stendar, Zenithar, Arche. While the goddesses represent the living, nurturing aspects of creation, 4 male deities form the structure of mortal society: the pursuit of knowledge, the administration of justice, the dignity of labor, and the acceptance of death. Together, they create the framework within which civilization functions. Julianos, known to the Nords by the older name Chunal, is the god of wisdom, logic, literature, law, history, and contradiction. He represents the pursuit of knowledge in all its forms, from the most abstract philosophy to the most practical application of learning. Among the divines, Julianos occupies a unique position. While other gods are associated with emotional or practical concerns, Julianos embodies pure intellectual pursuit. To his followers, the search for truth and understanding is not merely useful, but sacred in itself. Knowledge is not a gear, tool, it is a form of worship. This makes Julianos the patron of scholars, mages, and anyone who values learning above immediate material concerns. Mages Guild members often pray to Julianos before attempting difficult spells. Historians invoke his name when seeking to understand the past. Lawyers call upon him when interpreting complex laws. The most significant aspect of Julianos' worship is his connection to the Elder Scrolls themselves. These reality-defying artifacts, from which the entire series takes its name, are kept and studied by the monastic order of Julianos. The cult of the Ancestor Moth, which appears in Skyrim's Dawnguard expansion, is believed to be a subset of this order. The Elder Scrolls are not books in any conventional sense. They are fragments of creation itself, documents that record not just history, but possibility, prophecy, and truth beyond mortal comprehension. Reading an Elder Scroll without proper training and preparation can drive a person mad or blind them. Yet they contain knowledge that exists nowhere else, insights into the fundamental nature of reality. That Julianos' faithful are entrusted with these artifacts speaks to the god's importance. He is not merely the patron of learning, but the keeper of the most dangerous and powerful knowledge in all of existence. Julianos' commandments to his followers are straightforward. Know the truth. Observe the law. When in doubt, seek wisdom from the wise. These principles establish a hierarchy where those with greater knowledge have a responsibility to guide those with less, and where law is seen as an expression of collected wisdom rather than mere force. In Cyrodiil, during the Third Era, Julianos had a chapel in Skingrad, and his worship was particularly strong among the mages of the imperial city. The blessing of Julianos grants increased magicka, allowing spellcasters to achieve feats that would otherwise be impossible. Among the Nords, Chunal was once a significant deity, governing not just wisdom, but also mathematics and language. However, his worship has faded among the mercurial and warlike Nordic culture. They respect knowledge, but they value action and strength more highly. In modern Skyrim, Julianus's worship is more common in imperial settlements than in traditional Nordic communities. The Red Guard equivalent is Auriel, connecting wisdom to their creator deity, though this association is less direct than in other cultural adaptations of the divines. Julianus represents the belief that civilization advances through learning, that ignorance is not merely a lack of information, but a moral failing, and that the pursuit of knowledge is never complete. There is always more to learn, always deeper truths to uncover, always new ways to understand the world. If Julianus represents the intellectual pursuit of truth, Stendarr represents the moral application of that truth through mercy and justice. Stendarr, also known as Stendarr the Steadfast, is the god of mercy, charity, justice, compassion, and righteous rule. He is the apologist of men, the patron of the imperial legions, and the inspiration of magistrates and rulers throughout Tamriel. His sphere encompasses both the gentle hand of mercy and the iron fist of justice. This duality is essential to understanding Stendarr. He is not merely kind, he is righteously kind. He does not forgive all things. He forgives those who deserve forgiveness while ensuring justice for those who do not. Mercy and justice are not opposites in Stendarr's theology. They are two aspects of the same divine will. Among the Nords, Stendarr was originally worshipped as Stun, the god of ransom and the shield thane of shore. This older form emphasized Stun's role as the god who ensures captives can be redeemed and freed. As Nordic culture integrated with imperial traditions, Stun evolved into the more compassionate Stendarr, though elements of the older worship remain in remote areas. Stendarr's worship is organized around several major institutions. The Temple of Stendarr, with its chapel in coral during the Third Era, serves as the center of his formal worship. The Crusaders, a knightly order dedicated to Stendarr, act as his militant arm, protecting temples, hunting heretics, and ensuring that divine justice is carried out. But perhaps the most famous followers of Stendarr are the Vigilants. The Vigil of Stendarr was formed after the Oblivion Crisis, in response to the devastation caused by the Daedric invasion. These zealots wander Skyrim and beyond, hunting Daedra worshippers, necromancers, vampires, werewolves, and any other beings they consider abominations. The Vigilants are controversial. While their dedication is unquestionable, their methods are often brutal. They view the world in stark terms: the faithful and the damned, the righteous and the abomination. There is little room for nuance in their interpretation of Stendarr's will. This creates a theological tension. Stendarr is the god of mercy, yet his most devoted followers show precious little mercy to those they hunt. They would argue that true mercy requires the elimination of evil, that allowing vampires or Daedra worshippers to exist is itself an act of cruelty toward their victims. But critics see in the Vigilants the danger of righteous certainty taken to extremes. Stendarr's commandments are clear. Be kind and generous to the people of Tamriel. Protect the weak, heal the sick, and give to the needy. These words emphasize active charity, not passive kindness. Stendarr's followers are expected to intervene when they see suffering to use their strength in service of those who have none. The Hammer of Stendar, a legendary artifact rumored to have been wielded by the god himself, is said to be so heavy that 4 men are required to lift it. This emphasizes both Stendar's might and his burden. Justice is not light. Mercy is not easy. Those who carry Stendar's will carry a heavy weight. The benevolence of Mara and the Temple of Stendar have historically been allies, as both organizations focus on charity and aid to the suffering. While Mara emphasizes compassion and emotional healing, Stendar emphasizes justice and physical protection. Together, they form a comprehensive safety net for the most vulnerable in society. Stendar's blessing provides increased resistance to disease and poison, reflecting his role as protector of health and purity. His followers are particularly opposed to the undead, as necromancy represents a perversion of the natural order that Stendar cannot abide. The phrase, "Stendar's mercy be upon you," is common throughout Tamriel, often followed by the unspoken threat, "For I will give none." This captures the essence of Stendar's worship, the understanding that divine mercy exists, but it must be balanced with justice, and those who place themselves beyond mercy will face judgment instead. While Stendar governs the moral structure of society, Zenithar governs its practical foundation: work, trade, and commerce. Zenithar, known to the Bosmer as Zien and having equivalents in most cultural pantheons, is the god of work, honest trade, and labor. He represents the dignity of toil, the satisfaction of a job well done, and the prosperity that comes from fair dealing. Among the divines, Zenithar is perhaps the most straightforward. His sphere is not abstract or mystical. It is the daily reality of most people's lives: the work they do, the wages they earn, the goods they trade. He is the god of farmers and blacksmiths, of merchants and craftsmen, of everyone who makes their living through the sweat of their brow. Zenithar's origins are somewhat mysterious. Unlike most of the divines, whose presence at creation is well documented in myth, Zenithar seems to have emerged later. Some scholars suggest he may have been mortal once, or that he represents a later crystallization of certain principles that were distributed among other gods initially. Regardless, he is fully accepted as one of the 8 divines, and his worship is widespread. The god is closely associated with Kinnereth, as all materials used by craftsmen come from nature. Wood, metal, stone, all of these are gifts from Kinnereth's domain, shaped by human hands according to Zenithar's principles. This creates an interesting theological relationship. Nature provides the raw materials, human labor transforms them into value, and the cycle continues. Zenithar's worship emphasizes honest dealing above all else. His commandments are simple and direct. Work hard, and you will be rewarded. Spend wisely. Profit from your labors. These are not platitudes, but foundational principles for a functioning economy. The Church of Zenithar maintains that the god teaches mortals the value of earnest work and honest profit. They preach against exploitation, theft, and dishonest trade practices. A merchant who cheats their customers does not merely break mortal law. They commit blasphemy against Zenithar himself. This makes Zenithar particularly popular among the merchant class and trade guilds. Before signing a major contract, merchants often pray to Zenithar for favorable terms. Craftsmen invoke his name when beginning a new project. Even simple laborers might offer a quick prayer at the start of their workday, asking that their efforts be recognized and rewarded. Zenithar's chapel in Leowyn, during the Third Era, was a center of commerce and trade negotiation. Merchants would conduct business in the temple's courtyard, believing that deals made in Zenithar's presence were blessed and more likely to prosper. The priests would occasionally mediate disputes, using Zenithar's principles to determine fair outcomes. The blessing of Zenithar increases your ability to haggle and negotiate better prices, a practical benefit that appeals to anyone who buys and sells goods. Some faithful claim that wearing Zenithar's symbol during trade negotiations brings better outcomes, though skeptics argue this is merely psychological confidence rather than divine intervention. Among the Bosma, Zen is a somewhat different figure, the god of payment in kind. Wood Elven culture emphasizes reciprocity and balance, and Zen ensures that debts are paid and bargains kept. This version of Zenithar is less about accumulation of wealth and more about the fair exchange of value. The Khajiit know him as Zek, though his worship among the catfolk is less prominent than other deities. The Red Guards have a similar trade god in their pantheon, though the connection to Zenithar is not always made explicit. Zenithar represents the belief that civilization is built on labor, that prosperity comes from honest effort, and that a society where workers are respected and fairly compensated is a society blessed by the divine. In a world where nobles often look down on manual labor, Zenithar reminds everyone that all honest work has dignity and value. The fourth and final of this group is perhaps the most somber, Arche, the god of birth, death, and the cycle that binds them. Arche, also known as Arche or Orki in Nordic tradition, is the god of the cycle of life and death, governing burial rites and the passage of souls. His priests are responsible for tending to the dead, ensuring proper funeral rites, and protecting the sanctity of death itself from those who would pervert it through necromancy. Arche's origins are debated among scholars and vary by culture. One popular legend, particularly among the Bretons and recorded in the text Arche the God, claims he was originally a mortal shopkeeper who became fascinated with the nature of life and death. According to this tale, he studied obsessively until Mara took pity on him and transformed him into a god so that he could truly understand what he had spent his mortal life trying to comprehend. However, this is only one interpretation. Other sources, including the monomyth, suggest that Arche was one of the original spirits that crystallized after time began, meaning he was always a deity and present at creation like the other Aedra. Still others claim he is the son of Akatosh. The conflicting accounts make it impossible to determine with certainty which version is true, though the mortal to God story remains popular among his priesthood and provides inspiring symbolism about the relationship between mortality and divinity. Regardless of his origins, Arke's role in the pantheon is clear and vital. He governs the transition between life and death, ensuring that this passage happens naturally and peacefully. Death, in Arke's theology, is not an enemy to be feared, but a natural part of existence that must be respected and honored. This puts Arke and his followers in direct opposition to necromancers. Necromancy is not merely illegal in most parts of Tamriel, it is heretical. By raising the dead and binding souls to corpses, necromancers interfere with Arke's sacred cycle. They trap souls that should move on to their eternal rest, condemning them to unnatural servitude. The priests of Arke take this opposition seriously. They hunt necromancers with a zeal that rivals the vigilance of Stendar. Temples of Arke often include extensive crypts where the dead are carefully interred with proper rites, protected by holy wards against those who would disturb them. In Nordic tradition, Arke appears as Orki, but with a darker aspect. The Nords believe Orki is actually a Daedric prince in disguise, possibly Malakath or Mephala, who was tricked by Lorcan into becoming the god of death. This Nordic suspicion of death gods reflects their warrior culture, which values dying honorably in battle over peaceful death from old age. Arke's commandments focus on respect for the natural order. Honor the dead, do not raise the fallen, respect the cycle of life and death. These principles create a clear moral framework around mortality, teaching that while death may be sad, interfering with it is evil. The blessing of Arke provides resistance to diseases and to life-draining magic, reflecting his role as protector of the living against unnatural forces. His priests are often skilled healers, understanding that protecting life is as important as honoring death. During the events of Oblivion, the Grand Chapel of Arke in Cheydinhal suffered a terrible curse that trapped the souls of the dead, preventing them from reaching the afterlife. Resolving this crisis required purifying the chapel and breaking the curse, demonstrating that even divine spaces can be corrupted if not properly maintained. Arke's worship is perhaps most visible during funerals and in graveyards. When someone dies in Tamriel, a priest of Arke is called to perform the last rites. The body is blessed, prayers are said, and the deceased is committed to the earth with proper ceremony. For those who can afford it, being interred in the crypts of an Arke temple is considered the highest honor, as it places the body under divine protection. The necromancer's moon, Manimako, presents an interesting theological challenge to Arke's faithful. Manimako was a mortal who achieved divine ascension through necromancy, becoming a celestial body that empowers necromantic magic. Some argue this proves necromancy can lead to divinity, undermining Arke's teachings. Arke's priests counter that Manimako is a false god, an abomination, and that his existence is a testament to the dangers of necromancy, not its virtues. Together, these four gods, Julianos, Stendar, Zenithar, and Arke, create the practical and moral framework of civilized society. Knowledge, justice, labor, and death. These are the pillars upon which communities are built. While the goddesses provide life and beauty, These gods provide structure and meaning to that life. Chapter 7. The Missing God, Lorcan Shazar. We have spoken of 8 of the 9 divines, but there is a 9th, and his story is perhaps the most controversial of all. He is the god who is not worshipped, the divine who is conspicuously absent from the pantheon he helped create. His name is Lorcan, or Shazar, or Shor, or Sep, depending on who you ask. He is the greatest hero or the worst villain in all of creation. The imperial cult recognizes the existence of a god called Shazar, often called the missing god or the missing sibling. The Cyrodiilic tradition acknowledges that there was a 9th deity involved in creation, but unlike the 8 divines, Shazar does not receive temples or active worship. He is remembered, honored in a distant way, but not prayed to. The reason for this absence is his fate at convention. When Lorcan was judged for his role in creating Mundus, when his heart was torn from his chest and fired across Tamriel, he was effectively removed from the pantheon. You cannot pray to a god whose heart has been separated from his body. You cannot build temples to a deity whose very existence has been shattered. Yet Lorcan's influence permeates every aspect of Tamrielic theology. He is, after all, the reason Mundus exists. Without his vision, without his persuasion, the Aedra would never have created the mortal world. There would be no Nirn, no humans, no civilizations. The other gods might still exist in their perfect, immortal forms, drifting endlessly in Aetherius, but mortals would not. Different cultures interpret Lorcan's actions in radically different ways. To the Altmer, Lorcan is the source of all mortal suffering. They were once immortal spirits, perfect and unchanging. Lorcan tricked their ancestors into creating Mundus, and in doing so, cursed them with mortality, weakness, disease, and death. Every pain an elf feels, every indignity of mortal existence, is Lorcan's fault. They call him the Doom Drum, and his very heartbeat, still pulsing in Red Mountain, is a constant reminder of their lost divinity. The Altmeri understanding is that they are trapped on Nirn, prevented from returning to the divine perfection they once knew. Lorcan robbed them of immortality and gave them nothing of value in return. This belief drives much of Thalmor ideology, particularly their desire to undo creation itself and return to the state of the dawn. The Dunmer have a more complex relationship with Lorcan. They call him Lorcan the Trickster, or refer to the consequences of his actions through the worship of Boethia, who ate Trinimac and transformed him into Malakath. The Dunmer acknowledge Lorcan's role in creation, but do not worship him directly, focusing instead on their own tribunal and the Daedric princes. The Bosmer see Lorcan through the lens of Yufra's teachings. He is the spirit who brought the chaos that required the Green Pact to stabilize. They do not hate him as the Altmer do, but neither do they celebrate him. But to humans, Lorcan is the hero god. The Nords call him Shor, and he sits at the head of their pantheon. Shor is the warrior king who led the fight for humanity's place in the world. He died defending his people, and now he waits in Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife. where he presides over the honored dead. When a worthy Nord warrior dies in battle, they are taken to Sovngarde to feast in Shor's hall until the end of time. The Nordic tradition holds that Shor fought alongside Isgramor and the 500 companions when they first came to Skyrim. His spirit guided the Nords in their conquest of the land. Even in death, even with his heart removed, Shor remained present and active in the world, appearing through champions and heroes. The Hall of Valor in Sovngarde sits beneath the watchful gaze of the throat of the world, but Shor's throne is notably empty during the events of Skyrim. Some interpret this as Shor walking among mortals at that very moment, perhaps incarnated as the last dragon born. Others say the empty throne represents Shor's absence, his permanent sacrifice for humanity. The Imperials call him Shazar and acknowledge him as the spirit behind all human undertakings. Shazar's song, a sacred Cyrodiilic text, describes him as one who sometimes goes by the name Lorcan. The text portrays him as the champion of humanity who brought the spirit of ambition, struggle, and achievement that defines human civilization. Shazar appears throughout Imperial history, incarnating as great heroes during times of crisis. Pelinal Whitestrake, the mad champion who fought alongside Alessia, is widely believed to have been a Shazarine, a mortal avatar of Lorcan's spirit. His supernatural power, his berserker rage, his ability to slaughter entire armies single-handedly, all of these suggest he was more than human. Wulfharth Ashking, the ancient Nordic hero who died and was resurrected multiple times, is another suspected Shazarine. Zurin Arctus, the Underking who served Tiber Septim, may have been another. Even Tiber Septim himself might have been a Shazarine before his ascension to become Talos. This pattern of incarnation is crucial to understanding Lorcan's role in the world. Though his heart was removed, though his body was destroyed, his spirit persists. He cannot act directly, cannot manifest as the other divines do, but he can work through mortal champions. When humanity needs a hero, when the world faces its darkest moments, Lorcan's spirit finds a vessel and acts. The Khajiit have perhaps the darkest view of Lorcan, calling him the Moon Beast or Lorkaj. In their mythology, Lorkaj's heart was filled with the great darkness, and his evil nature corrupted him. When his heart was removed and thrown across the world, it created the dark heart of Lorkaj, a source of corruption that still threatens the Khajiit to this day. The Red Guards know Lorcan as Sep, the hungry stomach. In their tradition, Sep was so hungry he bit and couldn't fill himself with the stars. The Yokudan pantheon tells of how Sep was eventually defeated and separated, much like the story of Convention. But the Red Guard interpretation emphasizes Sep's destructive appetite rather than any noble purpose. The theological question that has raged for millennia is this: was Lorcan right? Did he sacrifice himself to give mortals the greatest gift imaginable, the gift of a world where they could grow, change, and achieve things impossible in the static perfection of Aetherius? Or did he commit the original sin, trapping divine spirits in mortal flesh and condemning all beings to suffering and death? The answer determines how one views all of existence. If Lorcan was right, then mortal life, despite its pain and limitation, is valuable and meaningful. Struggle gives purpose. Mortality makes every moment precious. Death gives life urgency and significance. If Lorcan was wrong, then all of existence is a cruel trap, and the only salvation lies in escaping back to divinity, in undoing creation itself. The Empire has historically sided with the view that Lorcan, through Shazar, was humanity's champion. But the absence of temples to him, the lack of active worship, suggests an understanding that his sacrifice was so complete that traditional veneration is impossible. You do not pray to Shazar. You honor him by living boldly, by embracing the mortal world he created, by achieving great things with the limited time you have. The heart of Lorcan remained in Red Mountain for thousands of years, pulsing with divine power. The Dwemer attempted to use it to create a god of their own, leading to their mysterious disappearance. The Tribunal, the god-kings of the Dunmer, drew power from it to maintain their divinity for millennia. When the heart was finally freed during the events of Morrowind, when the Nerevarine destroyed the enchantments binding it, the heart itself vanished. Some believe it returned to Lorcan, allowing him to finally rest. Others think it dispersed across the world, spreading his influence everywhere. Still others claim it simply ceased to exist, that the purpose for which it was separated had been fulfilled. Lorcan is the missing god, but his absence defines the pantheon as much as the presence of the other divines. He is the reason mortals exist, the champion who died so that humanity could live, the trickster who either elevated or damned all of creation depending on your perspective. He is not worshipped, but he is never forgotten. Chapter 8, Saint Alessia and the Imperial Pantheon. The 9 divines as they are known today, with their specific names and roles, did not always exist in their current form. The creation of the imperial cult as an institution is tied directly to one of the most important figures in Tamrielic history, Saint Alessia, the Slave Queen. To understand the imperial pantheon, we must return to the First Era, to a time when the Aeoliad elves ruled Cyrodiil with absolute power, and the human needies served them as slaves. The Aeoliads were sophisticated, powerful, and utterly cruel to their human subjects. They kept humans as property, worked them to death in their grand constructions, and worse. Some Aeoliad nobles practiced ritual torture as a form of entertainment. They would harvest the skin from living humans to make ornaments, or breed humans specifically for particular types of suffering. The needies, the proto-imperials, had been enslaved for generations. They had no army, no champions, no hope. But they had their gods, or at least, they had their prayers. The Needs worshipped a variety of deities, drawing from their Nordic ancestors and their own developing traditions. But their worship was fragmented, lacking the structure and power of organized religion. Different tribes venerated different gods, and the Aeoliads had suppressed most religious practice anyway. Into this desperate situation came Alessia, a slave woman who would change the world. According to legend, Alessia was born in the heart of Aeoliad territory. She witnessed atrocities that broke her spirit, and in her deepest despair, she prayed. She called out to any god who would listen, begging for salvation for her people, and Akatosh answered. The dragon god of time appeared to Alessia, or sent a vision, or granted her a revelation. The exact details vary by source, but the core message was clear. If Alessia could unite the human slaves and rise up against their oppressors, the gods would support her. More than that, Akatosh would make a covenant with her, granting divine protection to humanity in exchange for their faithful worship. But there was a problem. The Needies worshipped gods the elves did not recognize. Shor was despised by the elves as Lorcan. The totemic animal spirits the Nords venerated meant nothing to the sophisticated Altmeri and Aeoliad cultures. If Alessia was going to unite not just the slaves, but also gain potential elven allies who opposed Aeoliad cruelty, she needed a religious framework that could bridge the divide. This is where Alessia's true genius emerged. She did not simply revolt militarily. She created a theological revolution. Alessia took the Nordic pantheon, with gods like Kine, Shor, Stone, and others, and she identified them with elven deities. She declared that Kine and Kinnereth were the same goddess seen through different cultural lenses, that Shor and Shazar, while separate from the elven perspective, represented the same creative force, that Tsun, Stun, and the other Nordic gods were human interpretations of the great Aedra worshipped by the elves. This syncretism, this blending of human and elven religious traditions, created something new: the 8 divines. The 8 divines were gods that both humans and elves could recognize: Akatosh, Arche, Dibella, Julianos, Kinnereth, Mara, Stendar, and Zenithar. Each had roots in multiple cultural traditions. Each could be understood from multiple perspectives. The pantheon was designed to be universal, to create religious common ground between races that had been enemies for generations. This was revolutionary. By creating a shared religion, Alessia created the possibility of a shared society. Humans and elves could worship together. They could build temples together. They could stop seeing each other as fundamentally different and start seeing each other as fellow believers. With this religious foundation established, Alessia launched her revolt. The Slave Rebellion, also called the Alessian Slave Rebellion, was not just a military campaign, but a spiritual awakening. Slaves across Cyrodiil rose up, believing the gods were on their side, and crucially, some elves joined them, disgusted by Aeoliad cruelty and attracted to Alessia's inclusive vision. The rebellion also received aid from Skyrim. King Vrage sent Nordic warriors to support the uprising, bringing with them the warrior's fury that had once belonged to Shor. Among these champions was Pelinal Whitestrake, the legendary warrior who some claim was a Shazarin, an incarnation of Lorcan himself. Pelinal was unstoppable on the battlefield. He killed Aeoliad noble after Aeoliad noble, tore down their towers and broke their armies. His rage was so terrible that even Alessia's allies feared him. He was eventually captured and killed by the Aeoliads, but his sacrifice inspired the humans to fight even harder. With the gods' blessing and Pelinal's sacrifice, the rebellion succeeded. The Aeoliads were overthrown, their civilization shattered. Some fled to High Rock or Hammerfell. Others tried to survive in hidden enclaves, but their age was over. Alessia became the first empress of the new Cyrodiilic Empire. But more importantly, for our purposes, she became the first champion of the 8 divines, the prophet who had brought the gods and mortals together. Akatosh, true to his promise, made a covenant with Alessia. He granted her and her descendants dragon blood, the essence of his own divine nature. This dragon blood would mark the rightful rulers of the empire, and through it, Akatosh would maintain a barrier between Mundus and Oblivion, preventing the Daedric princes from manifesting physically on Nirn. The covenant was sealed in the Amulet of Kings, a powerful artifact containing Alessia's soul gem and 8 other gems representing each of the 8 divines. The amulet could only be worn by those of the dragon blood, and wearing it was both a symbol of legitimate rule and a necessary component of maintaining the divine barrier. As long as the dragon fires in the Temple of the One burned, renewed by each dragonborn emperor, Tamriel would be safe from Daedric invasion. This covenant would last for thousands of years, through the collapse of the Elysian dynasty, the rise of the Riemann dynasty, and eventually the Septim dynasty. But Alessia's legacy went beyond political power. She had created the framework for religious unity in Tamriel. The 8 divines became the official religion of the empire. Supported by state power and resources, temples were built in every major city. Priesthoods were organized and funded. The worship of the divines became synonymous with being a civilized, law-abiding citizen of the empire. The Alessian Order, a religious organization that arose after her death, took her teachings in more extreme directions. They enforced strict monotheism, claiming Akatosh was supreme and the other divines were merely aspects of him. They persecuted elven religious practices and even tried to erase Lorcan Shizar from history entirely. This extremism eventually led to their downfall, but their influence shaped imperial religion for over 1,000 years. When Alessia died, she was canonized as a saint, the first and greatest of the imperial saints. Prayers to Alessia ask for her intercession with the divines, acknowledging her unique position as the mortal who brought gods and humans together. The Alessian covenant proved that mortals and gods could work together, that divine power could be channeled through proper worship and righteous rule. It established the pattern that would define imperial history. Dragonborn emperors maintaining the covenant, serving as the bridge between the mortal and divine realms. And for over 3,000 years, it worked, until the end of the Third Era, when the last Septim died and the covenant was finally broken. But that is a story that leads us to the most controversial divine of all. Chapter 9, the 9th divine, Talos and his controversy. Throughout this exploration, we have spoken of the 8 divines, but the most common name for the imperial pantheon is the 9 divines. The 9th deity is not an ancient Aedra who helped create the world. He is not a force of nature or a fundamental principle of reality. He is Talos, the god of war and governance, and he was once a mortal man named Tibus Septim. The question of Talos's divinity is the single most contentious theological issue in the 4th Era, one that has sparked wars, justified oppression, and divided the faithful across Tamriel. To understand why, we must understand who Tiber Septim was and how he became a god. Tiber Septim was born Yalti Earlybeard in Atmora, or possibly Alcair in High Rock. The sources conflict. He came to prominence as a brilliant general in the service of King Culhwch of Calovia during the late Second Era. When Culhwch was assassinated, Yalti took the throne and the name Tiber Septim, establishing what would become the Third Empire. But Tiber Septim was more than a skilled general. He possessed the Thu'um, the voice, the power of dragons that had once been the domain of the ancient Nords. He bore the dragon blood of Alessia's covenant, marking him as a rightful heir to the empire, even though he was not of Alessia's actual bloodline. The gods, it seemed, had chosen him. Over the course of his reign, Tiber Septim conquered all of Tamriel. He unified the fractured kingdoms under a single banner, bringing what he called peace to the continent. Though many of the conquered peoples had a different perspective on that peace, he was aided in his conquest by powerful artifacts, brilliant strategy, and according to some sources, the Numidium. The Numidium was an ancient Dwemer construct, a massive brass god machine that could literally rewrite reality. Tiber Septim obtained the Numidium and used it to crush his enemies, particularly in Somerset Isle. The Numidium's reality warping power made resistance impossible, though some scholars note that the timeline of its use is suspiciously unclear. But the most important event in Tiber Septim's life, from a theological perspective, came at the throat of the world. According to legend, Tiber Septim climbed the highest mountain in Tamriel and spoke with the Greybeards, the masters of the voice. There, in a moment lost to clear historical record, something happened. The specifics are debated, but the outcome is clear. Tiber Septim underwent apotheosis. He became a god. Some accounts say he mantled Lorcan, stepping into the role of the missing god and taking on his divine mantle. Others claim he achieved Chim, a state of enlightenment where one realizes the universe is a dream but maintains their ego anyway, thus becoming dreamer and dream simultaneously. Still others argue his dragon blood and the collective belief of millions of worshippers literally transformed him into a deity. Whatever the mechanism, Tiber Septim died as a mortal and ascended as Talos, the god of war, the dragonborn god, the hero god of mankind. He joined the 8 divines as the 9th, completing the pantheon. For the entire Third Era, Talos was worshipped alongside the other divines. Temples to Talos were built in every major city, alongside or combined with temples to the 8. His blessing granted strength and endurance to warriors. His priests preached that he represented the potential of humanity, proof that mortals could achieve divinity through great deeds. Talos was particularly beloved by the Nords. He was one of their own, a Nord who had achieved what even Ysgramor had not: true godhood. The Nords saw in Talos the culmination of their heroic tradition, the ultimate expression of Nordic virtue. Shrines to Talos filled Skyrim, and his worship was deeply woven into Nordic culture. But not everyone accepted Talos's divinity. The Altmeri Dominion, and particularly the Thalmor faction within it, adamantly denied that Talos was a god. Their arguments were both theological and political. First, they claimed mortals cannot become gods. The Aedra sacrificed their divinity to create Mundus. That was a one-time event, a unique moment in cosmological history. Claiming a human can achieve godhood undermines the entire structure of Aldmeri theology, which holds that divinity was lost at creation and can only be regained by undoing creation itself. Second, they noted that Talos was specifically the god of human supremacy. His ascension was a claim that humanity had surpassed the elves, that a human had achieved what no elf ever had. This was politically and culturally intolerable to the Aldmeri dominion. Third, and perhaps most pragmatically, Talos was the god of the empire that had conquered and ruled the Aldmer for generations. Worshipping Talos meant acknowledging imperial dominance. Denying his divinity was a form of resistance against human imperialism. The conflict came to a head after the Great War between the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion. Though the war ended in nominal stalemate, the Empire was devastated and in no position to refuse Dominion demands. The White Gold Concordat, the peace treaty that ended the war, included a crucial clause: the banning of Talos worship throughout the Empire. This was devastating to Imperial faithful and absolutely unacceptable to the Nords. The Empire had agreed to outlaw the worship of their hero god, to declare that Talos, whose very ascension had demonstrated humanity's potential, was not divine after all. Temples to Talos were shut down. Priests were arrested. Simply owning an amulet of Talos became a crime. The ban sparked the Stormcloak Rebellion in Skyrim. Ulfric Stormcloak, Jarl of Windhelm, declared that an empire that would ban Talos worship had lost its legitimacy. He killed High King Torrig in single combat and launched a civil war to win Skyrim's independence. The theological debate about Talos reveals deeper questions about the nature of divinity. If Talos can become a god, then godhood is not a fixed category, but something that can be achieved. This has profound implications. It means mortals are not inherently lesser than gods. It means the barrier between mortal and divine is permeable. It means the Aedra's sacrifice might not have been permanent. Some scholars go further, arguing that belief itself creates divinity. Talos became a god because enough people believed he was a god. Their collective faith and worship literally mantled him into divinity. If this is true, then the Thalmor's ban on Talos worship is not just religious oppression, but an attempt at deicide, to kill a god by erasing belief in him. Others point out that Tiber Septim may have been a Shazarine, an incarnation of Lorcan. If so, his ascension was not a human becoming a god, but a god remembering what he always was. This interpretation sees Talos as the return of the missing god, the completion of a cycle that began at convention. The evidence for Talos' divinity, according to his faithful, is overwhelming. His blessings have power. Prayers to him are answered. His shrines provide tangible benefits. How can he grant divine blessings if he is not divine? The Thalmor respond that these are remnants of the belief invested in him, echoes that will fade Once worship ceases, proof of magic, but not proof of godhood. There is also the matter of the Mantella and the Underking. Some more esoteric interpretations of Tiber Septim's ascension suggest it involved his general Zurin Arctus and the ancient Nordic hero Wulfharth Ashking in a complex mythic pattern. According to these interpretations, what is called Talos might actually represent a fusion or oversoul of these three figures combined through an event called an enantiomorph. However, these theories are based largely on obscure texts and out-of-game sources, and the exact mechanism of Tiber Septim's apotheosis remains one of the great mysteries of Elder Scrolls theology. What is certain is that by the time of his death, Tiber Septim had become something more than mortal, whether through his own achievements, divine intervention, or some combination of both. In Skyrim, during the Fourth Era, Talos worship persists despite the ban. Nords wear amulets of Talos hidden beneath their clothes. Shrines to Talos remain active in remote areas. The Thalmor hunt these worshippers with justiciars, special agents tasked with enforcing the ban and arresting heretics. The Greybeards, the ancient masters of the Thu'um who live atop the throat of the world, refused to take sides in the debate. They knew Tiber Septim personally, or at least their predecessors did. They understand what happened on the mountain better than anyone. Yet they remain silent, offering no public confirmation or denial of Talos's divinity. Heimskr, the priest of Talos in Whiterun, preaches brazenly despite the ban, declaring Talos's glory in the city's main square. His passion is undeniable, his faith absolute. To him and believers like him, denying Talos is not just wrong, it is a betrayal of everything humanity has achieved. The controversy over Talos reveals that even in a world where gods demonstrably exist, where divine blessings have measurable effects, theology remains contested. The existence of the divine does not settle questions about the nature of divinity. If anything, in Elder Scrolls, it makes those questions more urgent and more dangerous. Talos stands as ninth divine, the god who was human, the proof that apotheosis is possible, and the source of the greatest religious conflict in the Fourth Era. Whether he is truly divine or a very powerful myth, his worship has shaped the political landscape of Tamriel and will continue to do so for ages to come. Chapter 10. Worship. Across the ages, temples, rituals, and influence. The theology of the divines is one thing. The lived experience of their worship is another. Throughout Tamriel's history, the 9 divines have been venerated in countless ways, their influence shaping daily life for millions of believers. In the First Era, immediately following Alicia's revolution, worship of the 8 divines was relatively informal. There were temples, yes, but religious practice was still forming its institutions. The various cultural groups that had united under Alicia maintained their own traditions while acknowledging the common framework of the 8. The Alessian order, which dominated imperial religion from 1E 243 to 1E 2321, formalized and standardized worship considerably. They established proper liturgy, created official prayers, organized the priesthood into hierarchies, and built grand cathedrals in major cities. They also, unfortunately, persecuted elven religious traditions and enforced an increasingly extreme interpretation of Akatosh-centered monotheism. When the Alessian Order fell during the War of Righteousness, a new form of worship emerged. The 8 divines were restored to equal status, and the religion became more inclusive and flexible. Different regions were allowed to emphasize different deities based on local needs and traditions. By the Third Era, the structure of divine worship had matured into its recognizable form. Each of the 9 divines had dedicated chapels, temples, or cathedrals throughout the empire. These sacred places served the faithful in many ways. They were, first and foremost, places of prayer. Citizens could visit temples to pray to specific deities, offer thanks for blessings received, or request divine intercession in their troubles. The air inside these temples was thick with incense and whispered devotion, the walls echoing with generations of prayers. But temples offered more than spiritual comfort. Visiting a shrine or altar granted tangible blessings, divine favor that manifested as increased strength, enhanced magical power, or protection from disease. Whether these blessings were genuine divine intervention or skilled priestly enchantments, the faithful received real benefits from their worship. Temples, particularly those of Mara, Arche, and Stendar, provided healing services to the community. Priests could cure diseases, heal injuries, and provide refuge for the sick. This made temples vital to any city's survival, offering aid when secular medicine failed. Temples of Julianos often included libraries and schools. The clergy were typically among the most educated members of society, and they took seriously their responsibility to preserve and transmit knowledge across generations. The benevolence of Mara, the works of Stendar's faithful, and various other temple-sponsored charities provided aid to the poor and vulnerable. Temples distributed food, offered shelter, and generally served as a social safety net when all other support had failed. Priests could settle disputes, offer moral guidance, and in some cases, conduct trials for religious crimes. The Church's interpretation of divine law influenced secular law throughout the empire, shaping justice from the highest courts to the smallest villages. The structure of temples varied by region and deity. In Cyrodiil, during the Third Era, most cities had a chapel dedicated to all 9 divines, with separate altars for each. This allowed citizens to pray to any divine they needed without traveling to multiple locations. Kvatch had the Grand Chapel of Akatosh, Coral had the Chapel of Stendar, and so on, but each also maintained altars to the other 8. In Skyrim, the pattern was somewhat different. Whiterun had a temple of Kinnereth, Riften had a temple of Mara. Solitude's temple of the divines honored all 9. Smaller shrines dotted the landscape, allowing travelers to receive blessings even in remote areas. Religious orders served as the militant and activist arms of the faith. The Knights of the Nine were a legendary order that sought out and protected relics of the divine. They eventually disbanded due to internal corruption, but during the Oblivion Crisis, the order was reformed by a champion who gathered the Crusaders' relics and defeated Umaril the Unfeathered, an ancient enemy who had returned to threaten Tamriel. The Vigil of Stendarr formed after the Oblivion Crisis, dedicated to hunting Daedra worshippers and monsters. The Order of the Hour protected Akatosh's temples. Various smaller orders served specific functions or protected particular holy sites. Pilgrimage was and remains an important aspect of divine worship. The faithful would journey to sacred sites to prove their devotion, seek specific blessings, or fulfill vows. The Throat of the World, the Adamantine Tower, the site of Alessia's tomb, all of these drew pilgrims. Completing a pilgrimage was considered both spiritually beneficial and socially prestigious. Religious festivals marked the calendar. The divines each had feast days when their worship was emphasized. These festivals combined religious observance with community celebration, strengthening both faith and social bonds. Prayer itself took various forms. Formal liturgy existed for temple services, with prescribed prayers and responses. But personal prayer was also common and accepted. The faithful could speak to the divines in their own words, requesting aid or giving thanks. The priest taught that sincere prayer from the heart was as valuable as any formal ritual. Offerings were common practice. Citizens would leave gifts at shrines or temples: money, food, weapons for warrior gods, books for Julianos, flowers for Dibella. These offerings supported the temples financially, while also allowing worshippers to demonstrate their devotion through sacrifice. The question of whether the divines actually respond to prayers is interesting. In the Elder Scrolls universe, divine intervention clearly happens. Champions receive visions. Blessings have tangible effects. Prayers are answered, sometimes directly and dramatically. However, the gods typically do not interfere directly in mortal affairs. They work through intermediaries, through champions, through subtle influences, rather than overt miracles. This creates a particular type of faith. The divines are known to exist and known to be powerful, but they are also distant. They created the world and then largely step back. They maintain the structure of reality, but do not micromanage mortal lives. Worship is not about placating angry gods, but about aligning yourself with divine principles, about living in accordance with the nature of reality as the gods established it. The Oblivion Crisis of 3E 433 represented a crisis of faith for many. The barriers between Mundus and Oblivion were failing. Daedra poured into the mortal world. Gates opened everywhere, and demons destroyed entire cities. Where were the divines? Why did they not intervene? The answer came in the form of Martin Septim. The last heir of the Septim line sacrificed himself, invoking Akatosh's power directly to banish Mehrunes Dagon. The avatar of Akatosh appeared, a massive dragon of divine fire, and fought the Daedric prince in the heart of the imperial city. The crisis was resolved through divine intervention, but it required mortal sacrifice to trigger that intervention. This pattern defines the relationship between the divines and mortals. The gods will act, but mortals must meet them halfway. Divine power is available, but it must be channeled through mortal will and mortal sacrifice. The divines do not simply solve problems. They empower mortals to solve problems themselves. After the Oblivion Crisis, worship of the divines paradoxically both strengthened and weakened. It strengthened because Akatosh's avatar had proven beyond doubt that the gods were real and that they cared about the mortal world. But it weakened because the covenant was broken. With no dragonborn emperor to light the dragon fires, with the amulet of kings shattered, the formal structure that had supported divine worship for 3,000 years was gone. The Fourth Era has seen religious turmoil. The ban on Talos worship fractured the imperial cult. The empire, weakened and desperate, could not enforce religious unity even if it wanted to. Different regions emphasized different deities. New heretical sects emerged. The Thalmor actively worked to suppress not just Talos, but all human-centric religious traditions. Yet even in this chaos, worship of the divines persists. The faithful still gather in temples. Priests still offer blessings. Pilgrims still journey to sacred sites. The institutional structures may have weakened, but the core relationship between mortals and the divine endures. Because ultimately, worship of the divines is not about politics or institutions. It is about the fundamental recognition that mortals live in a world the gods created, that divine principles govern reality, and that aligning yourself with those principles brings meaning, purpose, and power to mortal life. Chapter 11. The Gods in the Games. Across the ages of Tamriel, the 9 divines are not merely background mythology in Elder Scrolls history. They are living forces that have shaped every age, every crisis, every moment when mortals faced impossible odds. Let us journey through the ages and see how these gods have appeared and influenced the world across different eras. In the year 427 of the Third Era, Morrowind presents a unique religious landscape. The 9 divines are not the dominant faith here. The Dunmer worship the Tribunal, Vivek, Almalexia, and Sothasil, living gods who walk among mortals in flesh and power. They also revere the Daedric princes who aided their people, particularly Boethia, Mephala, and Azura, the 3 who showed them the path to their current existence. Yet the imperial cult maintains a presence in Morrowind, brought by the Empire's occupation. Imperial cult shrines stand in imperial-controlled areas, and the faithful work to spread worship of the 9 divines among a people who have little need for distant Aedra when their own gods breathe and bleed and speak directly to supplicants. The tension between the imperial cult and the tribunal temple reflects the larger cultural conflict between the Empire and the Dunmer. The tribunal are present, active, undeniably powerful. Why worship distant Aedra when you have gods walking your streets, gods who built your cities and protect your people directly? The irony runs deeper than most realize. The tribunal's power is borrowed, drawn from the heart of Lorcan, the very heart torn from the missing god at Convention. When that heart is freed, when the enchantments binding it are destroyed, the tribunal lose their divinity. 2 of them fall. One fades into obscurity. the false gods are revealed, and the way opens for the 9 divines to gain influence in Dunmer lands, though whether that influence will be welcomed remains uncertain. In the year 433 of the Third Era, the 9 divines moved from distant theology to immediate reality. The entire crisis that nearly destroyed Tamriel revolved around the covenant between Akatosh and mortals, and what happens when that covenant breaks. Emperor Uriel Septim VII and all his known heirs were assassinated by the mythic Dawn, a cult devoted to Mehrunes Dagon. With no one to light the dragon fires, the barriers between Mundus and Oblivion began to fail. Oblivion gates opened across Tamriel like wounds in reality itself, and Aedra poured through to devastate the mortal world. A hero emerged from the Imperial dungeons, someone who would become known as the Champion of Cyrodiil. This champion helped Martin Septim, the last unknown heir of the Septim line. Martin had been discovered living as a priest of Akatosh in Kavach, unaware of his true heritage. Throughout the crisis, Martin grew from a simple priest into a true emperor, someone who understood the weight of the covenant and proved willing to pay its price. The climax came when Mehrunes Dagon himself manifested in the imperial city, physically appearing on Nirn in violation of all cosmic law. Martin stood before the Temple of the One, held the Amulet of Kings in his hands, and made his choice. He shattered the artifact, invoking Akatosh's full power directly. Martin transformed into the avatar of Akatosh, a massive dragon wreathed in divine fire. The avatar fought Dagon in a battle that shook the foundations of reality, eventually driving the Daedric prince back into oblivion and permanently resealing the barriers. Martin died in the transformation, his mortal form consumed, but his sacrifice saved the world. The statue of Akatosh's avatar remains in the Temple of the One, a permanent testament to divine intervention and mortal sacrifice. That moment proved beyond any doubt that the divines still watch over Tamriel, that they will act when the need is dire enough, and that mortals and gods can still work together to preserve creation. Throughout these events, the faithful interacted with the 9 divines through their temples. Each major city had a chapel where blessings could be received, where the divine presence could be felt in stone and prayer and sacred fire. The Knights of the Nine, an ancient order reformed during this era, sought out the Crusaders' relics, artifacts blessed by the divines themselves. Their quest led them to defeat Umaril the Unfeathered, an ancient enemy who threatened the faithful. These relics, the sword, mace, boots, cuirass, gauntlets, greaves, helmet, and shield of the Crusader, each embodied divine blessing, and together they formed a complete divine armament. Gathering them required pilgrimage and penance, demonstrating that divine power must be earned through virtue, not simply claimed through force. 2 centuries later, in the year 201 of the 4th Era, Skyrim presents the 9 divines in their most conflicted state. The White Gold Concordat has banned Talos worship, creating a profound religious crisis among the Nords. This ban ignited the Stormcloak Rebellion, making religion a central wound in the civil war, tearing Skyrim apart. Temples to the 9 appear throughout the province. The Temple of Kinnereth in Whiterun, the Temple of Mara in Riften, the Temple of the Divines in Solitude, all serve their communities while navigating the political tensions that had threatened to consume the land. Priests heal the wounded, perform marriages, and provide spiritual guidance in an age of uncertainty. Shrines to the divines dot the landscape like prayers carved in stone, offering blessings to travelers. These shrines stand at crossroads and near major cities, allowing the faithful to receive divine aid without entering settlements. Some are maintained by local communities. Others seem to persist through divine will alone, weathering centuries of snow and wind. The Talos controversy bleeds through everything. In Whiterun, a priest named Heimskr preaches about Talos in the city's main square, his voice echoing with passion and defiance. Talos shrines hide throughout Skyrim, maintained by faithful Nords who refuse to stop worshipping their hero god despite the ban. Wearing an amulet of Talos can draw Thalmor attention, potentially leading to arrest, or worse. The greybeards atop the throat of the world represent an older approach to divinity. They worship the voice itself as a gift from Kain, maintaining ancient traditions that predate the imperial cult. Their relationship with the divines is direct and personal, rooted in Nordic tradition rather than imperial standardization. They have walked with gods and heroes, yet they remain silent on the great theological debates of the age. The last Dragonborn walks through this fractured world, bearing the dragon blood of Akatosh, marked by the same divine essence that once flowed through emperors. This creates a strange tension, a hero connected to the divines by blood, while navigating a world where divine worship has become a crime. The Dawn Guard crisis introduces the Moth Priests, servants of Julianos who can read the Elder Scrolls. These ancient scholars prove vital to preventing Harkon's plan to blot out the sun, demonstrating that even in the Fourth Era, even in a time of institutional collapse, the servants of the divine still play crucial roles in protecting creation. ESO takes us back to the Second Era, to a time long before the events of the later games. The Nine Divines stand well established. The Empire holds strength, and Talos has not yet been born. This allows us to see the divines in a more stable religious context, before the crises that would shake faith in later ages. The Planemeld crisis unfolds as Molag Bal attempts to merge Tamriel with Cold Harbor, threatening all of Mundus. While the divines do not directly intervene, as Akatosh would centuries later, their temples and faithful play crucial roles in resisting the Daedric invasion. Priests offer sanctuary from the chaos. Blessings aid warriors fighting Daedric forces. The theological certainty that the divines oppose this invasion motivates resistance across the continent. ESO reveals regional variations in divine worship more clearly than the later games. In Daggerfall Covenant territories, worship follows Breton and Redguard traditions, emphasizing different aspects of the same gods. In Ebonheart Pact lands, Nordic interpretations of the divines coexist uneasily with Dunmer tribunal worship, creating theological tensions that simmer beneath political alliances. In Aldmeri Dominion regions, the divines are acknowledged, but often through elven names and perspectives, Auriel instead of Akatosh, maintaining the ancient divisions that would never truly heal. The story of the Five Companions involves Manimarco, who seeks to transform himself into a god through necromancy. His eventual success, becoming the necromancer's moon, demonstrates that apotheosis is possible even through dark means. This foreshadows Talus's later ascension through more heroic methods, proving that the barrier between mortal and divine can be crossed, though the price is always steep. Throughout all these ages and games, the 9 divines provide more than just background mythology. They offer tangible blessings at their shrines and altars. They drive the narratives forward through quests and prophecies. They shape the world through temples, priests, and religious culture that permeates every settlement. They force mortals to grapple with questions of faith, sacrifice, and the relationship between the divine and mortal realms. The gods are not mere decoration in these stories. They are active forces, shaping events and empowering mortals who align with their principles. Whether you walk as a faithful devotee or a secular adventurer, whether you believe or doubt, the influence of the 9 divines permeates every corner of Tamriel, from the highest mountains to the deepest dungeons, from the grandest cathedrals to the loneliest roadside shrines. Chapter 12. The Living Gods. We have walked a long path tonight, from the beginning place where twin forces first clashed to the troubled 4th era, where ancient covenants lie shattered and faith itself is contested. We have seen how the Aedra sacrificed their infinite power to create a finite world, how Lorcan's vision and the other Aedra's willingness brought Mundus into being at terrible cost. We have explored each of the divines, from Akatosh, who makes time flow, to Arche, who ensures death's sanctity, from Kinnereth, who provided space itself, to Talos, who proved mortals can ascend. We have witnessed how Saint Alessia forged religious unity from cultural diversity, how the covenant with Akatosh protected Tamriel for thousands of years, and how that covenant's breaking at the end of the 3rd era ushered in a new age of uncertainty. But perhaps the most important lesson in all of this is what the divines represent about the relationship between mortals and gods in the Elder Scrolls universe. The Aedra are not distant, uncaring forces. They gave everything to create the world you walk through, to make possible the life you live. Every breath you take is a gift from Kinnereth. Every moment of time is Akatosh's providence. Every act of love reflects Mara. Every pursuit of knowledge honors Julianos. Every honest day's work glorifies Zenithar. The gods are woven into the fabric of reality itself. You cannot escape their influence because they are the world. To exist in Mundus is to live in a realm shaped by divine sacrifice, governed by divine principles, and held together by divine will. Yet the divines do not control you. They gave up that power when they created a world of limitation and choice. Mortals have free will, the ability to choose virtue or vice, to worship or blaspheme, to align with divine principles or reject them entirely. The Aedra provided the framework, but mortals write the story. This makes mortal life both precious and fragile. Unlike the eternal, unchanging existence of the dawn, mortal life is temporary. You are born, you live, you die. There is no going back, no infinite chances, no escape from consequence. But that limitation is what makes every choice matter. That fragility is what makes heroism heroic and sacrifice meaningful. The controversy over Talos epitomizes this tension. If a mortal can become a god, then the distinction between divine and mortal is not absolute. The Aedra's sacrifice was not a one-way descent, but a transformation that opened new possibilities. Mortals lost direct access to divinity, but they gained the potential to achieve it through their own efforts. Whether Talos is truly divine or the greatest myth in history, his worship represents humanity's refusal to accept permanent inferiority. It is the claim that mortals are not merely created beings, but creators themselves, capable of reshaping reality, just as the Aedra once did. The Thalmor seek to undo creation, to return to the dawn and reclaim their lost divinity. But in doing so, they would erase everything that has been achieved in the mortal world. All of civilization, all of history, all the love and beauty and meaning that mortals have created would be destroyed to restore an abstract perfection that may never have been as perfect as memory claims. The faithful of the Nine Divines take a different position. They argue that creation was not a mistake, but a gift. That mortality is not a curse, but an opportunity. That the limited world the Aedra created is more valuable than the infinite void they left behind, precisely because limitation forces growth, challenge drives achievement, and mortality makes every moment precious. Standing in a chapel at dawn, watching light stream through stained glass, depicting the 8 divines gathered around an empty throne meant for Talos, you can feel the weight of this theological debate. These are not abstract philosophical questions. They determine how you live your life, what you value, what you fight for. If the Thalmor are right, then the entire history of Tamriel has been a tragic mistake that must be corrected. If the faithful are right, then that same history is the most important thing in existence, worth defending at any cost. The divines themselves remain silent on this debate, or perhaps they speak through the world itself. Time continues to flow, proving Akatosh endures. Nature continues to flourish, proving Kinnereth's gift persists. Love continues to bind people together, proving Mara's influence remains. Knowledge continues to accumulate, proving Julianos watches over those who seek truth. Justice and mercy continue to matter, proving Stendarr's principles guide civilization. Honest work continues to build prosperity, proving Zenithar's model functions. Death continues to give meaning to life, proving Arche maintains the cycle. And somewhere, in hidden shrines and whispered prayers, Talos continues to be worshipped, proving that faith can endure, even when institutions fail, that devotion can persist even when law forbids it, and that the mortal impulse toward divinity cannot be suppressed by any earthly power. The 9 divines are living gods, not because they walk among mortals as the tribunal once did, but because they live through mortal action. Every time someone shows mercy when vengeance would be easier, Stendarr lives. Every time someone creates something beautiful when they could have settled for the merely functional, Dibella lives. Every time someone persists through hardship when surrender seems rational, Akatosh lives. The gods gave mortals the world. Mortals give the gods meaning. It is a partnership, a covenant that extends beyond the formal agreement Akatosh made with Alessia. The Aedra could not exist as they do without mortals to worship them, and mortals could not exist without the Aedra to provide the world in which they live. This is why the temples remain open even when empires fall. This is why priests continue their rituals even when war rages outside. This is why pilgrims still journey to sacred sites even when roads are dangerous. The relationship between mortals and the divines transcends politics and survives catastrophe because it is woven into the fundamental structure of existence. In the Fourth Era, in the aftermath of the Oblivion Crisis and the civil war in Skyrim, the future of the Nine Divines is uncertain. The formal institutional structures have weakened. The empire that enforced their worship for 3,000 years is a shadow of itself. The ban on Talos worship has created schism and resentment. New religious movements challenge traditional orthodoxy. Yet the gods endure. They endure because mountains still rise toward the sky, because rivers still flow to the sea, because the sun still marks time's passage, because people still fall in love and raise families and create beauty and seek knowledge and demand justice and die with dignity. The divines are not fragile. They cannot be killed by decree or weakened by disbelief. They are the bones of the world, the rules by which reality operates. As long as there is time, Akatosh exists. As long as there is nature, Kinnereth exists. As long as mortals strive for something greater than themselves, the spirit that Lorcan embodied persists. What may change is how mortals relate to the divines. The imperial cult, with its formal hierarchies and state sponsorship may fade, but worship itself will adapt and survive. Perhaps it will return to something more like what Alessia envisioned, a flexible framework that allows different cultures to honor the same fundamental principles in their own ways. Perhaps entirely new forms of devotion will emerge, suited to the challenges of a new age. Or perhaps, as some whisper in dark corners and hidden temples, another mortal will achieve what Tiber Septim achieved. Perhaps the Dragonborn who defeated Alduin will one day ascend, becoming the 10th divine. Perhaps someone we have not yet heard of will discover the path to apotheosis and walk it, proving once again that the barrier between mortal and divine is not absolute. The story of the Nine Divines is not finished. It continues in every chapel where a priest offers blessing to a weary traveler. It continues in every shrine where a warrior prays before battle. It continues in every moment when someone chooses to act according to divine principle rather than mere convenience. The gods are not distant abstractions in the Elder Scrolls universe. They are present in every breath, every heartbeat, every choice. To walk through Tamriel is to walk through a world shaped by divine hands, to live in the dream that Lorcan dreamed, to breathe the air that Kinnereth provided, to exist in time that Akatosh maintains. And if you listen closely, in the silence between heartbeats, in the moment before dawn, in the depths of meditation or prayer, you might hear them still, the whisper of divine will flowing through the world. the echo of that first creative act when the Aedra gave everything to make reality possible. They are the 9 divines, the Aedra, the gods who sacrificed infinity to create the finite, who gave up perfection to make possibility, who became less so that mortals could become more. They are the foundation of the world, the structure of reality, the living principles by which existence operates, and their story, like the world they created, continues to unfold with every passing moment, with every mortal choice, with every act of faith or defiance, with every prayer whispered and every blessing granted. The age of the gods is not over. It transformed into the age of mortals. And in that transformation, both divine and mortal became something neither could have been alone. That is the true miracle of the 9 divines. Not their power, though it is immense. Not their age, though they are eternal. But their willingness to sacrifice everything they were so that something new could exist. So that you could exist. So that the story could continue. And as long as mortals live and breathe and struggle and triumph in the world the Aedra created, the 9 divines will endure, not as distant overlords, but as the very essence of the world itself, the divine made manifest in every stone and stream, every moment and memory, every life lived and every death faced with courage. This is their legacy. This is their gift. This is the covenant that binds the mortal and divine together in an eternal dance of creation and meaning. The 9 divines live, and through them and through you, the world lives as well. If you enjoyed this deep exploration into the theology, mythology, and living worship of the 9 divines and the Aedra, please leave a like and subscribe for more comprehensive Elder Scrolls lore videos. There is so much more to explore in this incredible universe, from the Daedric princes to the lost civilizations of the Dwemer, from the complex politics of the Second Era to the mysterious prophecies that shape Tamriel's future. Your support helps me continue creating these detailed explorations of the lore we all love. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the divine mysteries of the Elder Scrolls. Until next time, may the 9 watch over you, and may your path be guided by their eternal wisdom.